Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. Living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Now, God can only be satisfied by your worship when the worship you did just now is translated to your living. It's translated to your submission in your daily living. And then do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Now, I spoke about this verse last week. There are two conditions prior to testing the will of God. Right? Remember that? First, what is that? First, it is putting yourself on the altar as the living sacrifice. Am I right? Now, a living sacrifice is one that listens to Him actively. Not one that do dead and ritual sacrifice. You get what I mean? One that listens to God actively and abide by Him. God takes no pleasure in our worship just now if you don't put it in your mind. All right? So what do I mean by putting yourself on the altar? It means handing over your sovereignty to God. It's no longer you. It's no longer your career, your relationship, your time. It's no longer that. Now, don't be tempted to believe that what He wants is always not what I want. Now, that's the problem with Christian. What He wants will be what you eventually want. But probably it may not be what you want now because you are trapped in your temporal judgments and feelings for the time being. Satan always plants doubts and contrary to the truth. Okay? So, the God-fearing people, what will he do now is, because what you want is for the best of me and what I will eventually want and benefit, so I deny any of my judgment and feeling that is in contrary to your will now. That is called putting yourself on the altar. That is called handing over your sovereignty to God. And the second thing is, do not conform to the pattern of this world. What does that mean? Do not think like the world or feel like how the world feels. Because the world puts no faith in the truth of God. All right? Whatever the world says and feel come from human values and beliefs. Human values and beliefs is temporal, is changing. That's why Satan is always changing its form to lure men into self-centeredness. Okay, today you have this fashion, tomorrow you had that design, whatever. Everything changed. New information. So people, because they're not rooted in the truth, they want new things, new feelings, new likings. You got what I mean? Okay, this is where Satan is doing. Because everyone, when they conform to the values and beliefs of this world, they are shaped and directed by whatever the world tells you. So if you want to test the will of God, now the first thing, do not conform to the ways of this world. You know it's changing and temporal. It's going to go around, come back again. So be renewed, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, what is that? By the truth of God, acquire new values about your life. Acquire new values about money. Acquire new values about relationship, about career. Now, how should you do it? Acquire new values and beliefs about these things. Now, if not, you can never test the will of God. What is meant to serve you, for instance, money, is meant to serve us. Eventually, it will enslave us. Am I right? Because once you get the wrong values about money, something that should be your slave, that should be of use for you, become your master now. And you're not going to enjoy it. What should satisfy you? That is the relationship, marriage that God has given us. No. It doesn't satisfy us when we always fear about losing it. No, when you fear of losing something, you never possess it. I always say, you don't know. When it will go, you cannot enjoy it now. Now, verse 3 onwards went on to say about the practicality of the will of God. Now, the will of God is always practical. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. I want to bring your attention to the key word here, that is sober judgment. Truth must materialize into the will of God through sober thinking. Now, some people, the way they think is not sober. It remains high, abstract, irrelevant. Like they don't care where God put them. They don't care what people think. They don't care about the roles and positions they have. They don't care about the gifts that God has given them. They never think through what they're doing. Is it beneficial to people around them? It's not sober. They are thinking of themselves out of the position, the roles that God has given them. It could be many things. The way to think is, I feel I want it, I like it, but it doesn't bring about the common good. So, please people, when you want to know the will of God, you must learn how to think soberly. Okay, and when you talk about the will of God, one thing you cannot miss is love. So verse 9 onwards talks about the spirit of God's will. It's always to love.